What are you doing to my grandson?" The voice cracked through the nursery like thunder. Olivia froze. The baby was still against her chest, quiet for the first time in days, his tiny lips pressed to her skin. Across the room, Eleanor Washington's hands shook with rage. "Put him down right now." The mother was on her knees, sobbing. The father stood silent. And in that frozen second, surrounded by money, marble, and fear, nobody moved. Not even the baby who had just remembered how to live. The screaming had started hours ago, one long, desperate wail echoing to the Biltmore estate. Doctors had come and gone, their briefcases heavy with science and failure. The infant heir to the Washington fortune hadn't eaten in nearly 4 days. His heartbeat was slowing. His mother's hope was gone. And now, in the middle of this southern mansion built by old money and quiet cruelty, life had stopped for everyone but the maid. Olivia James had been working here less than a month. No one asked her name twice. No one knew she cried every night for the baby she lost back in Atlanta. But when she saw Wendy Washington's tiny fingers twitch, something inside her broke open. She didn't mean to step forward, didn't mean to hold the child. But when she did, her body remembered what her heart had tried to forget. The room fell silent except for the sound of the baby finally feeding. The one sound no amount of money could buy. "You saved him," the mother whispered. But Olivia could already feel the temperature shift, because saving a rich man's son came with a cost she couldn't yet imagine. And in this house, salvation was just another word for scandal. Before we go back to where this story began, let me ask you something. Have you ever done the right thing and paid for it anyway? If your heart already knows what that feels like, stay. Because this story doesn't just test compassion, it exposes it. The morning Olivia James arrived at the Biltmore estate, she heard crying long before she saw the mansion. Not the kind of cry you can fix with a lullaby, the kind that claws through walls. She gripped her worn purse, straightened her uniform, and whispered, "Lord, give me strength." She had no idea that before the week was over, she'd be the one holding the Washington family's greatest secret in her arms. The morning light spilled to the tall windows of the Biltmore nursery, like gold through glass, too soft for the chaos it revealed. Bottles littered the carpet. Towels were streaked with tears and formula. The baby's faint cries trembled in the air, weak, uneven, fading. Olivia stood in the doorway, frozen. Mrs. Washington was on the floor, silk robe stained with milk and sweat, rocking her son as if motion could keep him alive. "He won't eat," she sobbed. "He just won't." Her voice broke on the last word. Olivia's fingers tightened around the towel in her hands. She'd promised herself she would never speak out of turn. But the baby's cry cracked something inside her chest, the same way her own baby's had before he slipped away in that tiny Atlanta apartment. "Ma'am," Olivia's voice trembled. "I think I can help." Mrs. Washington looked up, eyes raw and swollen. "You? How?" Olivia hesitated, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I lost my baby 3 months ago," she whispered. "But my body, it still thinks he's here." The room stilled. For a moment, neither woman breathed. Mrs. Washington's gaze darted to the sleeping monitor, then back to the frail child in her arms. "You mean—" Olivia nodded. "If you let me try, just once. If it doesn't work, I'll leave right now." Tears blurred the mother's vision. "Please," she said finally, voice breaking under the weight of despair. Olivia knelt, her knees sinking into the plush rug. She reached out, gently taking the baby into her arms. Wendy's body felt too light, too still. She positioned him the way she had once done with her own son, the motion as familiar as breathing. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the baby stirred, his tiny nose twitched, mouth searching, and he latched. Olivia gasped. The pain hit first, sharp and real, but then came the warmth, the unmistakable rhythm of life being pulled back from the edge. Wendy drank greedily, desperate for the world that had almost forgotten him. Mrs. Washington pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "He's eating," she whispered. "My God, he's eating." Tears fell freely, hers and Olivia's together. Two mothers, one rich, one invisible, bound in a silence too sacred for words. When it was over, Wendy slept peacefully for the first time in days. Olivia handed him back and rose slowly, her heart heavier and lighter all at once. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. But for the first time since her baby's death, she felt whole. Sometimes saving a life means breaking a rule. If you've ever believed compassion matters more than appearances, stay with this story. Let it remind you why hearts, not titles, keep the world alive. Morning at Biltmore carried the illusion of peace. Sunlight crept through long hallways lined with portraits of Washington ancestors, men who'd built railroads, owned banks, ruled towns. Olivia moved quietly beneath their painted eyes, her uniform crisp, her steps careful. She felt different today. Lighter. The baby had eaten. He had lived. In the kitchen, the other maid spoke in hushed voices about the miracle. Olivia said nothing, but her heart glowed with a secret warmth. For once, she'd done something that mattered. By mid-morning, she was upstairs dusting the nursery, humming softly as Wendy stirred in his crib. He made a small sound, half cry, half sigh, and without thinking, Olivia lifted him. "You're all right, little man," she whispered, rocking him gently. His eyelids fluttered, tiny mouth curling into something that almost looked like a smile. That was when the air shifted. "Put him down." The voice, sharp and commanding, came from the doorway. Olivia turned. Standing there was Eleanor Washington, tall, elegant, terrified in a crimson dress and pearls that gleamed like tiny threats. Her expression was pure steel. "Put him down," Eleanor repeated, each word colder than the last. Olivia froze, her hands trembling. "Ma'am, he was just fussy. I didn't." "Don't speak," Eleanor snapped. "I know what you did. I know what you've been doing." Her words sliced through the air, drawing the attention of two housemaids lingering in the hall. They whispered behind gloved hands as Eleanor strode into the room. "You are unfit," she hissed. "Unsanitary. I will not have a stranger, a servant, contaminating my grandson." Olivia's heart pounded. "I only wanted to help." He wasn't. "Enough." Eleanor's voice rose, sharp as breaking glass. "You should have stayed in your place." The baby startled, beginning to cry again. Eleanor's fury seemed to feed on the sound. "You will pack your things and leave this house by sundown," she said. Moments later, George appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. His tie hung loose, his face pale. "Mother, what's going on?" Eleanor turned to him, her tone switching instantly from rage to icy composure. "This girl has been doing something unspeakable. Ask your wife if you doubt me." George's gaze shifted to his wife, standing in the corner, clutching Wendy protectively. "It's true," she said softly. "But she saved him, George. He's alive because of her." The room fell silent. Gratitude battled shame in every breath. No one moved. Hours later, Olivia found herself standing outside the massive iron gates of the estate. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky the same color as Eleanor's dress. Her hands shook as she clutched her small purse. For the first time, hope felt heavier than fear, because deep down she knew salvation had just become her greatest sin. For reasons she didn't understand, Olivia wasn't fired. Not yet. The housekeeper told her she could finish the week, while things were sorted out. Every step she took in the mansion felt borrowed, every breath temporary. The staff avoided her eyes now. To them, she was a rumor walking on borrowed time. The baby, though, he was thriving. Every morning when Olivia passed the nursery, she could hear Wendy's soft coos through the door, healthy and full of life. She'd done that. She'd saved him. And somehow, that made what was coming easier to bear. On Wednesday afternoon, she was sent to dust a private study, the one room no one but Mr. Washington entered. It was a shrine to lineage and legacy. Leather chairs, portraits of old patriarchs, the smell of cigar smoke and secrets. Olivia moved slowly, careful not to touch anything that looked expensive enough to ruin her life. On the heavy mahogany desk lay a worn Bible, its spine splitting with age. She reached for it only to straighten it, but when she lifted it, something slipped out, a yellowed photograph folded in half. She caught it before it hit the floor. At first, she thought it was just another portrait, but when she unfolded it, Her stomach turned cold. A black woman sat in a rocking chair, a white infant pressed to her breast. Both looked at peace, almost holy. On the back, in faded handwriting, Esther and baby George, 1932. Olivia sank into the nearest chair, heart pounding. Baby George. The realization crawled over her skin like static. Eleanor's son. The same George who now ran the estate. Eleanor had been fed by a woman like her, a woman whose name history barely remembered. The photo trembled in her hand. This was more than irony. It was revelation. Eleanor's disgust wasn't about morality. It was memory. That night, Olivia found Mrs. Washington alone in the nursery, rocking Wendy to sleep. She showed her the photo in silence. The mother's eyes widened, mouth parting in disbelief. "So it's true," she whispered. Her own mother hired a black nurse, and she buried it. They sat together, the past pressing in around them. "If she hid this," Mrs. Washington said, "what else has she buried?" Olivia folded the photo carefully and slipped it back into her pocket. "I don't know," she said softly, "but one day we might need the truth." She didn't know then how right she was, that the picture she now hid in her apron would become her only defense when everything else fell apart. The mansion felt different that morning. Too quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. Olivia could feel it in her bones as she polished the silver, the tension humming behind every whispered conversation. Something was coming. By noon it arrived. The staff was told to clear the main parlor. Heavy doors shut, curtains drawn. The Washington family gathered in private, their voices rising and falling to the thick walls like muffled thunder. Olivia couldn't hear words at first, only tones, rage, pleading, disbelief. Then one voice cut through them all. Eleanor's. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her tone carried the weight of money, legacy, and unbreakable control. "This ends now," she said. "That maid is a danger to this family and to our name." George's voice came next, low and weary. "Mother, please." "Don't mother me. This isn't about pity. It's about propriety." The doors opened suddenly. A servant motioned for Olivia. Her stomach dropped. They wanted her inside. The room was suffocating. Chandeliers gleaming. Portraits of ancestors watching. Eleanor stood by the fireplace. Her crimson dress replaced by deep navy now, but her eyes burned the same. "There she is," she said. The woman who thought she could cross medical and moral boundaries as she pleased. Olivia tried to speak, but Eleanor's words rolled over her. "Do you understand what you've done? You've risked that child's health, this family's reputation. You've created a scandal waiting to happen." Mrs. Washington rose from the couch. Her voice shook, but her resolve didn't. "She saved him," she said. "Wendy was dying, and every doctor we paid failed him. Olivia gave him life. That's not a scandal, that's grace." Eleanor turned sharply, pearls flashing in the firelight. "Grace?" she repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "You call this grace? I call it disgrace." Then she looked to her son. "You have a choice, George. Fire her today, or I'll see to it that every penny of this family's inheritance is withheld. The company, the estate, all of it." The silence that followed was unbearable. George stared at the floor, torn between the two women who defined his world. His wife's eyes pleaded. His mother's glare demanded. Finally he spoke, voice hollow. "Give me time." Eleanor's expression didn't soften. "You don't have time," she said, turning away. "You have a decision." Olivia left the room trembling, her pulse a storm in her chest. She'd saved a life, and now it might cost her own. Every family hides a line. They swear no one should cross, until love steps over it. If you've ever stood up for what was right, even when it cost you peace, hold on to this moment. Because courage, like milk, comes from pain. The first headline hit before sunrise. Black maid breastfeeds millionaire baby. Scandal at Biltmore Estate. By mid-morning, the story was everywhere. Morning radio, gossip columns, church pews. The world outside the estate walls had found its new obsession. Cameras appeared at the iron gates, reporters shouting questions into the wind. Inside, the mansion felt less like a home and more like a courtroom. Servants whispered behind polished doors. Eleanor Washington had retreated to her suite, speaking only through lawyers. George paced the hallways, jaw tight, eyes shadowed. Olivia's name was on everyone's tongue, but never spoken to her face. She could feel it in every look, every step. When two men from social services arrived with clipboards in quiet disdain, she knew the rumors had gone too far. "Mrs. James," one of them said, "we receive an anonymous complaint. It alleges you engaged in unauthorized feeding." Unauthorized feeding. The words felt like poison in her mouth. They questioned her for hours in the kitchen, about hygiene, consent, her motives. Every word she spoke was written down, stripped of meaning. When she finally looked up, her job was gone. "Suspended pending investigation," they said. "You'll be notified." As she left the estate, she saw Mrs. Washington standing in the nursery window, holding Wendy close. The baby was crying again, a familiar, desperate sound that cut through the glass like a blade. Olivia pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "He won't eat again," she whispered. "Not without me." For days, the estate became a fortress of shame and silence. The press dug into everything: Olivia's past, her wages, her skin. Eleanor's friends whispered about standards and boundaries, their polished hypocrisy gleaming brighter than the estate's marble floors. Then something shifted. Dr. Whitmore, the pediatrician from Duke, broke his silence. Standing outside the hospital, he faced the microphones and said the words that changed everything. The baby was in critical decline. Mrs. James's actions, however unconventional, saved his life. There's no question. The statement rippled across the country. News anchors debated it. Pastors preached about it. Mothers cried watching it. What had been called scandal now began to sound like sacrifice. George read the article twice. His hands shook as he folded the paper, his mother's denials ringing hollow in his ears. For the first time in his life, he wondered if Eleanor Washington, his mother, his moral compass, his queen, had been wrong all along. The storm that had been circling the Biltmore estate finally broke. Not with thunder, but with truth waiting to be found. George's wife, Margaret, hadn't slept in days. Every time she looked at Wendy, she saw Olivia's steady hands, her quiet bravery, and the injustice that had followed. She couldn't shake the thought. Why would Eleanor fight so hard to erase the woman who saved her grandson? So she searched. The estate's archives stretched beneath the west wing, a forgotten library of ledgers, portraits, and dust thick as velvet. She lit a single lamp and started pulling drawers open, page by page, year by year. The air smelled of cedar and secrets. Then, behind a tall cabinet, she saw it, a small false wall, barely an inch deep, that would look newer, patched over long ago, heart pounding. She pried it open with a brass letter opener. Inside, wrapped in yellowed linen, was a bundle of letters tied with fading blue ribbon. The first one was dated 1933. The handwriting was delicate but firm. "My name is Esther. I write this so my truth won't vanish." Margaret sank to the floor and read. The letters told the story of a young black woman forced into service at the estate, how Eleanor's mother, Abigail Washington, had demanded she nurse her newborn son, George. Because Abigail herself had fallen ill, Esther wrote of the nights she stayed awake, singing to a baby she wasn't allowed to call hers, of being told to disappear once the child no longer needed her. She said if I ever spoke, they'd have me arrested for theft of blood. I did nothing but give. By the final letter, Margaret's hands were shaking. The truth was unmistakable. Eleanor's rage toward Olivia wasn't born from disgust. It was inherited shame. The past was repeating itself, and she was trying desperately to bury it again. Margaret folded the letters carefully and looked toward the ceiling, as if the house itself could hear her. "You buried a woman's love to protect a name," she whispered. "Not this time." That evening, as the rain beat against the stained glass windows, she stood in the doorway of Eleanor's sitting room, the letters clutched tight in her hand. Eleanor turned from her mirror, startled by the look in her daughter-in-law's eyes. "We need to talk," Margaret said quietly. "About Esther and about you." For the first time, Eleanor Washington looked afraid. The foundation of her legacy had just begun to crack, and the truth was coming for everything she'd built. The courthouse smelled of old wood and nerves. Reporters lined the hallway, their cameras ready, notebooks poised like weapons. The story had exploded beyond Asheville. Now it was America's morality play, and everyone had chosen a side. Olivia sat at the defense table, hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the aisle, Eleanor Washington arrived in a flash of navy silk and diamonds, chin lifted as if she were attending a gala instead of a reckoning. She didn't glance at Olivia once. George and his wife entered together, but the space between them spoke volumes. Margaret clutched a small bundle of letters against her chest, the truth she had dug out of the estate's bones. Olivia could see her trembling from across the room. The judge entered. "Let's begin." Eleanor's attorney went first, his words rehearsed and clinical. My client's only concern was the safety of her grandson. Mrs. James, a household employee, acted outside medical protocol and parental consent. We demand full accountability. The judge turned to Margaret. "Mrs. Washington?" Margaret stood, voice steady but eyes bright with fury. "Your Honor, may I read something into the record?" The judge nodded. She opened the letters. The paper crackled like fire. "My name is Esther," Margaret began. "I was told to nurse the Washington baby in 1932 because his mother refused to. When I asked for pay, she threatened me with prison. When I asked for acknowledgement, she said my name would never be spoken in this house again." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor's face went pale. Margaret continued, voice breaking only once. "She said if I ever told anyone, they'd call me a liar, but I only gave that child life." When the last word fell, silence swallowed the room. The judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "So," he said finally, "history repeats itself." Eleanor rose from her seat. "That's nonsense. Those letters are forged." But the judge's gavel struck, sharp and final. "Enough. This court finds no wrongdoing by Mrs. James. On the contrary, her actions likely saved an infant's life. The false complaint filed against her will be investigated." Eleanor's composure cracked like glass. The cameras caught everything. The trembling lip, the darting eyes, the desperate retreat as she fled the courtroom, legacy unraveling in her wake. Olivia stood there trembling, tears streaking down her face. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, baby boy. You showed me how to love again." Outside, flashbulbs exploded like lightning. Inside, peace finally found her. Spring came to Biltmore, like a quiet apology. The snow melted from the blue hills. The gardens bloomed again, and for the first time in months, laughter returned to the halls. The scandal had passed, leaving only what truly mattered, life fragile and new. Olivia walked the long corridor toward the nursery, her steps soft against the polished floors that once echoed with fear. She was no longer the help. The papers had made official. She was Wendy's caregiver now, part of the Washington household in a way no job title could define. The room smelled of sunlight and baby powder. Wendy was standing near the crib, pudgy fingers gripping the edge for balance. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "There you are, sweetheart," Olivia whispered, kneeling down. "Come on, you can do it." He took one step, then another, wobbly, brave, determined. When he stumbled, she opened her arms, and he fell against her chest, giggling. She held him close, breathing an impossible sweetness of the moment. Behind her, a soft knock. George and Margaret stood in the doorway, both smiling through tears. "Looks like someone's been practicing," George said, his voice lighter than it had been in months. Margaret nodded, then stepped forward, holding a cream-colored envelope sealed with gold wax. "Olivia," she said, her voice trembling, "we want to make something official." Olivia frowned, confused, as George unfolded the document and read aloud. "By the authority of the state of North Carolina," he began, "we hereby name Olivia James the legal godmother of Wendy Washington." Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, no, sir, you don't have to." Margaret stopped her gently. "We want to. You gave him life when no one else could. You gave us life." Tears spilled freely down Olivia's cheeks. For the first time since her own child's passing, she felt something close to peace, like the world had finally come full circle. They stood together in the golden light, three adults bound not by class or blood, but by something stronger: forgiveness, grace. Outside, the mountains shimmered in the afternoon sun. Inside, Wendy laughed again, his tiny hands reaching for the woman who had saved him. Sometimes love breaks rules to rewrite them. If the story reached the part of you that still believes love can heal what money breaks, stay. Not just to watch, but to remember, because when you carry stories like this, you carry proof that goodness still wins. Olivia smiled through her tears, looked down at Wendy, and whispered, "You saved me, too."